Abertillery in Monmouthshire in Wales was a quiet mining town in the early 1920s, but that changed in 1921 when Harold Jones murdered 2 local girls. Frida Burnell lived at 9 Earl Street in Abertillery and had gone on an errand for her father to a local shop, Mortimer's General Store at 90 Somerset Street, a grain merchant's, but was found dead in a back alley the following day at 19 Duke Street. She was 8 years old. Working at the store was 15-year-old Harold Jones, who worked there as a shop boy. At the time, he lived at 10 Darren Road and was described as a nice, helpful young man who was always polite and well-behaved. He also had a girlfriend, Lena Mortimer. At around 9:10 that Saturday, 5th February, Frida had done as asked by her father and had gone to the store, but Jones told her they had none of the grit she'd wanted in the shop, but did have some in the seed store around 400 yards away. He told her that if she went there and waited for him, he would follow her and get the seeds from there. With Herbert Mortimer, the shop owner, busy elsewhere in the shop, Jones slipped out without telling Mortimer. The storage shed was at 108 Princess Street. Jones made sure he stayed far away enough from the girl that if he was seen, he wasn't in her company. When he arrived at Mortimer's shed, he invited her into it and pointed out a bag of grit that she had needed. He then pounced on her and tried to assault her. He then strangled her and bludgeoned her before finally suffocating her with a scarf. He left her in the shed. When Frida didn't return home, her parents raised the alarm and a search got underway. When night fell, Jones moved Frida's body from the shed and dumped her in the lane at Duke's Hill, where she was found the next morning. A local surgeon performed the post-mortem on the girl on the kitchen table, while her family looked on. Local police knew they couldn't handle the case themselves, so detectives from Scotland Yard were brought in to help with the investigation. About a week later, a local asked the police if they knew about Mortimer's storage shed, and when they searched it, they found a handkerchief belonging to Frida that had fallen out of her pocket, presumably while Jones was assaulting her. They knew they'd found the murder scene. Frida's cause of death was given as shock due to the assault, and she had injuries to her private area and to her neck caused by partial strangulation. Also cited as contributory factors were injuries to her forehead from being hit, most likely to stun her, and fright. It couldn't be determined if the assault had taken place before or after death. Jones was soon arrested by the Scotland Yard detectives, but locals were shocked and there was an outpouring of support for him. He was taken into custody and charged with the murder of Frida. Jones protested his innocence throughout his time in custody and at court, stating, "I know it's all black against me, but I didn't do it." The case came before Monmouthshire Assizes on Tuesday, 21st June, 1921. However, the prosecution was dealt a blow when Mortimer, Jones' employer, took the stand. He and his family believed the police were fitting Jones up for the murder, one they simply couldn't believe he'd committed. They were so convinced he was innocent that they were prepared to lie about Jones' movements to the police and to the court. The jurors believed Mortimer, and Jones was found not guilty. The people of Abertillery were delighted with the outcome, treating him almost like a hero, and he was even presented with a gold watch. Just 11 days later, he murdered again. Not far from Frida's grave in the local cemetery is that of Florence Little, an 11-year-old girl who was murdered shortly before Frida had been laid to rest. She had lived a few doors down from Jones in Darren Road, and at one point had openly accused Jones of murdering Frida. On Friday, 8th July, she was playing with her sister Flossie outside Jones's home, and having invited Florence into his house for a glass of lemonade to make peace with the girl, Jones strangled her and assaulted her. He then went on to slit her throat and drained her lifeless body of its blood in a crime that shocked the town. The hero was no more. Again, Jones was the last person to see the missing girl alive when her family raised the alarm, but the police weren't prepared to believe his story this time. It was too coincidental, and they immediately searched his home. PC Cox went to the top of the stairs and noticed near the attic hatch that the wall had been cleaned, and the constable wanted to know why. Cox then climbed into the attic, and it was there he found Florence's body. Jones's horrified father was told about the body in the attic. He went up to his son and said, "Harold, the body's been found in the attic." But Jones protested his innocence once more, claiming he knew nothing about it. He said to his father, "I swear I don't know anything about it." His father then said to him, "Well, it's either you or me, son, and God knows I didn't kill her." Shortly after the discovery, Florence's body was removed from the house, and she was buried close to her friend Frida a few days later. A large number of people attended her funeral. Harold Jones was brought before magistrates on the charge of murder, but again pleaded his innocence. However, the evidence was mounting up. He'd been found with 7 ladies' handkerchiefs in his pockets, trophies from girls he'd wanted, and 2 of them belonged to his victims. It transpired that semen had been found on Florence during the post-mortem. A few of the handkerchiefs belonged to his girlfriend, Lena. His case was brought before a juvenile court before Mr. Justice Bray on Tuesday 1st November 1921, as he couldn't be tried as an adult due to his age, and it was only this that stopped him from being hanged. On Wednesday 19th October, he'd signed a statement which said, "I hereby state that it is my intention to plead guilty for the crime of having murdered Florence Little, upon which I now stand charged." Now that he'd admitted the murder, he hoped he would get a lesser sentence, and despite calls for his execution, the 15-year-old was sentenced to be detained at His Majesty's pleasure for the killing of Frida and Florence. During his time in prison, Jones had psychiatric assessments. One of these took place on 31st October 1923, while he was being held at Maidstone Prison, where he claimed he attacked the girls to kill them, the first time he said he associated cruelty with sex. But he also claimed the attacks had nothing to do with sexual desire, but the psychiatrist didn't believe him, thinking that arousal was only achieved through the murders. The local community was shocked by what Jones had done, and it took time for them to heal. Jones ended up spending 20 years in prison and was released in 1941. The decision went against the recommendations from several professionals in the prison service, especially after he told the prison authorities shortly before his release, "I do not want to lose the desire to kill." Shortly after leaving prison, Jones was conscripted and served in Libya. He remained in the army for nearly 5 years. During his time in prison, he'd learned engineering in the prison workshop, so became a gunfitter. He was demobbed on 6 January 1946 and headed to London, eventually settling in Hammersmith, where he found work easily. At this time, he also changed his name to Harold Stevens, his mother's maiden name, and married Muriel Ellen May Widows, a 35-year-old spinster, on Saturday 28 August 1948 at All Saints' Church in Fulham. He used his false name on the marriage certificate, but before he died, told his wife to use the name Harold Jones. During the 1960s, the Hammersmith nude murders took place, and today there is some speculation Jones may have been responsible for the killing of these 6 women. Harold Jones died on 2 January 1971, just days before his 65th birthday.